And we are live.
Great. So let's wait. There is a delay between when we
Yes,
stream and by the time. So Ghazal, how has been the response from the community? Do you think it has helped people? And
absolutely, sir. Especially these two sessions. They've
yeah,
proven really helpful and they've motivated a lot of people to start their CISSP journey, because I've had a lot of conversations where CISSP aspirants have told me that they've been wanting to start for the past year or past 2 years, and now finally they're getting the push. So I
great.
think
So
this was a wonderful offering by you, actually.
actually, what we have experienced is, we generally uh, wait for a right
Hmm.
opportunity for us to start the
Hmm.
preparation for this exam. It's of course it's very long, it's tiring, so you
Yeah.
have to keep the preparation journey very short for this particular certification.
Hmm.
I guess we're live.
Right. Yes, we are live. Hi,
Okay,
Ian.
let's.
Hi, Rama. People have started joining.
Yeah, so we'll
Hi,
wait for
Mohan.
2 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, so let's wait for some time. Hi, good evening, Ian, Rama, Mohan. They have been consistent. Okay, people
Yes, they're
asking for the
seriously
link in
there.
the group, Ghazal. Would you look into it?
Okay. Okay, Amit, I'll help him out.
So, good evening, everyone. We'll start with domain 6, 7, and 8 today. Try to finish to give you an overview of what's important. And I can tell you that whatever I've touched, you will definitely face in the exam. I've picked up those topics which will definitely come in the exam. There's no doubt about it. Right. So conceptually, I think I've covered a lot. Conceptually, I've covered a lot of ground. So you have to apply it at the conceptual level. Of course, the preparation takes much more than this much preparation, but it's a good overview which I've been able to provide to all of you. Those who want to prepare themselves, they need to remain at very very high level. Don't go technical. Most of us in our initial years, go we start with technical roles, right? I remember I started with a technical role, and initially was a planning manager for Indian Army's own IP network way back in 2003, where we were deploying a lot of IP MPLS switches, Nortel switches, right? So those days we were more hands-on, and so initial years we are more hands-on, and then we cannot correlate everything from a very very top view. But CISSP gives you that top view level, security uh, overview. And that's why I always say CISSP is not a specialization certification, but it's something which lets you grasp your complete uh, experience into how to manage information security of an organization. And cybersecurity is just one part of that complete game. So I think I will start off. Maybe I'll give a minute more and let more people join so that we can start with domain 6, domain 7, and domain 8 of our CISSP preparation master hour, a 3 hour program spread over last 3 days. I hope it has helped a lot, and I'll continue to do this session at least once every quarter. Right. So let's start with today's agenda, which is domain 6 and what domain 6 covers, right? So domain 6 is about testing security. So whenever ultimately what will happen is you deploy, you carry out your risk assessments, you engineer systems, you take care of your communication and network security, identity and access management. But any process, and security is now a management process, any process, unless it is tested, audited, reviewed, will not have a correct you won't get a correct feedback about how to manage security, right? So let's go to domain 7. Domain 7 is about what are the major testing types in security which you will come across today, right? First is vulnerability testing. Vulnerability testing is basically to find vulnerability in your systems, in your processes, in your applications. even humans, right? Even humans are vulnerable to social engineering attacks. So do you have a process to manage your vulnerabilities, whether it is people, whether it is processes, or whether it is technology? And then you do penetration testing. Penetration testing is basically done to understand whether the vulnerabilities which are existing in your organization, can they be exploited. So if they can be exploited, it's a proactive action you're trying to take, that can attackers exploit your vulnerabilities, you know uh, and do you have those vulnerabilities? Now, whenever we carry out pen testing, it's of three types: black box, white box, gray box. Definite question. Yeah, CISSP definitely tests you around these three concepts. Black box is when you're penetration testing an application or an infrastructure, or a process, without having any knowledge of it. So basically, you are trying to simulate an attacker's perspective and trying to get information, trying to get a perspective from attacker's point of view. White box is when you give complete access to the penetration tester. Generally, white box testing we do with internal pen testers. We do not get external pen testers and do white box testing, because then you are looking at some kind of data exposure. Now, what could be the risks of white box uh, you know uh, pen testing by an external party? And what could be few risks? Can I have a small chat session with all of you where they says, okay, what could be the major risks with a white box penetration testing through an external party? Would you like to do it, or would you not like to do it? If you would like to do it, why? What are the guardrails you would like to have? Or would you like to have an internal team? It's not possible at times to have a complete internal team or specialized teams which can do that. In that case, you might have to rely with third parties. So in your assessment as an information security officer or a CISO, do you think white box is a good approach while you are hiring external penetration testers? And if you are, then what are the guardrails you are going to put? So this is a small discussion point. Everybody can chat this, their thoughts and their point of view on the chat box, please. So Yan said no, because you would not know the entire security landscape. So if you give it to a third party, the third party may not know everything, right? That's a possibility. Or there could be a chance in point that you are giving third party a lot of information about your enterprise, right? Is there a risk of data exposure or information exposure which arises from third parties? It's a major critical risk, right? So generally it's not a good approach, and generally what is followed is gray box. You What would be the major reason for gray box approach vis-a-vis a black box or a white box approach? Why would you like to go for a firstly, why would you like a gray box? Is where you give limited information and you do not expose the entire infrastructure or application or the code to the penetration tester. Why would you go for a gray box approach? What is the major uh, you know saving grace here in gray box? Yeah, of course it's way better, but why do you go for gray box for third parties? You can go for a black box. Why not black box? Why gray box? We can go for mixed approach. Of course gray box is mixed approach, but why would you do that? So what does it solve? What it solves is time, to be honest. Whenever we do, I've been a penetration tester myself. It's very difficult to, as a black box tester, to gather information about an application. If you have good proxies behind your app, ahead of your application, it's very very very, very difficult to find out your IP addresses, your network architecture. So a penetration tester has to spend a lot of time to find or understand your infrastructure or your applications. If you have good security controls, it might be very difficult to find out, right? So to save on that time, you expose certain limited information, that what are your core internet gateway IPs, uh, what could be your public facing systems which are behind a proxy or behind some kind of a technology which hides it from the external network. So you would like to give some open ports, you create simulated ports, you do simulations to get an understanding that, okay, if this kind of a vulnerability exists on your infrastructure, what can happen. And that's why we follow the gray box approach. And generally in enterprises, gray box is a better approach, right? We give certain amount of certain level of access, right? Time limitation is one of the major, actually. Most of the time organizations want to get over with it because there is a compliance requirement, there's a client requirement. And if you go for a black box, the penetration testers will say, okay, we need to set up the entire. First, we have to carry out OSINT analysis. We have to go on dark web. We have to do phishing simulations. We will have to probably may have to get inside, uh, physically to penetrate your systems and architectures, right? So that could be one of the reasons why you don't go for a black box and save on time and resources, right? So testing is something which is done frequently, okay, and testing follows with a report. Test will always follow with a report. Testing is used to maintain systems at a baseline or above the baseline level so that the security controls are working properly. That's your main aim. Then why do you need to do an audit? What is the difference between a test and an audit, right? Test, if it is required to maintain your security at a given baseline, given level, what is the aim of audit? That's my question to you. So that you clearly understand, we use terminologies very, very loosely. Oh, let's do a security test. Security test might involve few tools, right? Something which is probably part of a custodian's or an administrator's daily task. So what is a security audit? Not always, Ian. Not always. Compliance is one of the requirements, maybe. But what is the major requirement? Okay. So major requirement, firstly, of a security audit is firstly to carry out a formal review. You do a formal review against a standard. A standard could be industry standard or a regulatory standard or a framework, right? You do an audit to present to mainly find out gaps in your systems and processes. Aim is to find out gaps so that you can improve. These are the three main aims. Aim is to firstly have a not a compliance check. Compliance comes later. Compliance is part of due diligence, right? Audit is not necessarily done for compliance. Please understand that. Audit is done to have a formal review of your security posture, right? So that the gaps are understood and you can improve upon. That's the aim. Please understand that. Audit is not done to do whether you are compliant or not. No, audit is done to find, it's a formal process to find gaps in your organizational security process, right? And to understand gaps and improve upon it. That's the main aim. Audit is always followed up with a audit report, right? That's the main aim. Understand that. So then what is a security assessment? Okay. If audit is a formal review, then what is a security assessment? So always remember, security assessment is akin to audit, but always carried out by specific system you know, specialists. Like if you want to carry out a review of your network architecture and network security, you will get network security specialists carry out an overall holistic network security architecture review, okay, followed with an assessment report. So assessment is somewhere more technical, more system specific, and is meant for internal consumption so that you can improve upon your existing processes. There is a subtle difference between audit and assessment. Assessment might have a broader evaluation of multiple systems. Audit to check the processes and the controls, right? So that there are no gaps. So this is very important to understand. So what happens is mainly you need to understand penetration testing. Penetration testing has, 5 steps. So because one of the most important security measure that we always talk about, when there was a time when we used to talk about cybersecurity, and everybody will say, oh, penetration testing is cybersecurity, right? So that was the notion about cybersecurity. So whenever you carry out penetration testing, first you need to find out about the enemy, or find out about the target, and that phase is called planning and reconnaissance. You carry out reconnaissance, and it's a military terminology, right? Where you find out, you recce the area, you recce the target system as to what are the weaknesses, to mainly find out the weaknesses. And mainly the only way you get into infrastructure is to find open ports today. Okay, any normal non-apt penetration tester or an attacker would like to get open ports. That's his main aim, because once he finds open ports, he finds services running which will be which will have certain kind of vulnerability, and then they will create exploits. So next step is to carry out scanning of your infrastructure to find open ports on your servers, on your serverless entities, or your dockers, whatever is running. I would like to get some open ports, and generally the most common tool used is Nessus, Nmap, to find what kind of ports are open, what kind of services are running. Then I would like to exploit. Exploit means, once can I gain access to your system because there is a port open, there is a gap in your system. Can I get access to some endpoint, or can I install a malware on one of your systems and can have a remote access? Or do you have a port open which, one of the systems is running a telnet, and I can just do RDP and get access to the system, and then it's just an open game after that. So I would like to do that, or I would like to escalate my privileges on your systems so that I can get further access. Right? Once I've gained that initial access, now I would like to persist on your network. I would like to persist. So I would like to hide in your network. I would like to create small VPNs. I will do salami slicing attacks. I'll keep some, I'll try to hide so that your detection systems are not able to detect me. I will lie low. I will be in the shadows, and that's generally called persistence or privilege escalation, where I'm trying to find out, okay, can I get access to your AD? If I can get your access to your AD, game is over generally, right? And then you finish it with a testing report. Generally, that's what the penetration testing phases are, right? Now, one of the most important part of security assessment and testing is to manage logs, right? So if you do not have logs, you will not be able to go back in time and find what happened in your security system. So most of the digital systems today, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is applications, generate system logs, security logs, event logs, and those logs needs to be aggregated into some kind of log monitoring technique. Which is the most common log monitoring technique or tools which you come across? So anyone would like to give a small answer? Okay, 20 years back, how were we analyzing logs? Today, how are we analyzing logs? Right? How are we analyzing logs today vis-a-vis how were we analyzing logs 20 years back? Yeah. So sorry guys, just a second. Lost track. Right. So yeah, I remember at least 20 years back we were using syslog manual correlation. We used to have few tools, Logstack, Loglab, open source tools, very very simple tools which we would use to collab log, and it was actually very very difficult on those days, right? Today we have SIEM systems, security information and event management systems, which is one of the most common tools today, where we aggregate all the logs and then we have dashboards. We can query the logs. So Splunk is one of the common tools which is used. You have now Microsoft Sentinel, right? So those there were days of manual where analysts would sit down, go through logs, manual review in silo systems, as Manjeet says. Yes, those were also the days. I remember 2008, 2000, you know. 2004 2008, where we would constantly go through logs. Our SOC team was all about going manually through all the logs, right? And the SIM is one of the favorite questions for CISSP. Right now, it's also important to understand that your organization would also be, maybe developing their own applications, right? Software companies create a lot of applications. Now, when you create applications, there are many types of ways in which the code which is written, ultimately ultimately your infrastructure runs the code. Your code is compiled, and it's a build which runs on your infra, right? And the entry you get always is from the software side, right? Generally hardware penetration is a very very difficult attack, so gaining access through software is one of the easiest part. Therefore your code needs to be very secure. So generally when software developers develop code in good organizations, code goes through something called a code review process, where the senior manager will review the code. There are peer reviews carried out. After that, the code is put into something called an SAST tool, which does a code analysis when the code has not been built, and you run a DAST tool once the code has been built. Right. So these are the small things which did get does get asked on CISSP question. But nowadays we also have something called IAST, interactive. So whenever you build code, it's built in functions, different build sections, and not everything is compiled as one uh, software. There are separate sections of code which are built. So IAST tools give you the leeway of testing a software between a static code and between when it is compiled as a code, right? So IAST tools help you in interacting with the code between SAST and DAST. That's the broad understanding, right? Now once you audit systems, right, so audit when you audit systems, you audit against a particular standard or a particular compliance requirement, right? And one of the most universally accepted assessment criteria is something called SOC. Can someone type it out? What is the full form of SOC? And I will explain what is SOC. Don't go with security operations center. This is an assessment standard, okay? And it's called an attestation standard, against which your applications, your services, your organization, your product can be audited or assessed. And then you are issued with some kind of reports, which I've listed actually on the slide. What is the full form of SOC? If somebody is an auditor or somebody has gotten their systems assessed. Yeah, so Mohan is very correct. Service organization control. So you do a attestation of a system, product, whatever you want to attest against SOC. What is the standard which is followed? Anyone? There's a standard which is called TCSec, ITSec, but today this is standard is something called Trust Criteria Service, TCS, ISO IC 1540. You don't have to remember for the exam, just for your knowledge, right? It's called TCS, Trust Criteria Services. There are 63 controls, if I'm not wrong, right? And you are assessed against those controls, right? So SOC has three major reporting structures. One is SOC 1, which is generally used to report your financial controls, right? Not important for infosec professionals. SOC 2 is important because it basically looks at your security, information security, and privacy controls, right? And SOC 3 is a report which you can report for financial, infosec, whatever you want to do for public consumption. Because SOC 2 is a detailed assessment and it might have a lot of confidential information. There are two types of reports: SOC 2 type 1 and type 2. In fact, any report can be type 1. This can also be type 1, type 2. This can also be type 1, type 2. The main difference is very common question. Type 1 is a assessment during a point in time. Okay, auditor comes, assesses you for 2 3 days and gives you a report. Whereas type 2 report extends over minimum, should be minimum over 6 months. That means auditor audits your systems and processes and products over a longer duration of time. That's something which is important, right? Now, one of the most common ways in which you generally test your application is by a testing technique called synthetic transactions. So, what are synthetic transactions? Synthetic transactions are generally applications, any kind of application, say a banking application, and you want to check whether that application is working correctly, right? And what happens is you carry out scripted transactions. Say I want to continuously see whether uh, we are doing a transaction, whether on the database the mathematics is happening correctly or not. So we will do a scripted transaction of additions or scripted transactions of subtractions or multiplications on the database. That is basically called synthetic transactions. Right. So generally, this is broadly what is covered in domain 6. Short domain, it generally takes 1 day to prepare for short domain 6. So let's have a few questions and then we will go ahead. The question is there on your screen. Right. Pretty good. You have no prior information, black box. Right. Right. Okay. So you have not examines the application source code without executing. Is it dynamic? Dynamic is when the code is running. Fuzzing is random inputs to application. Runtime application is a process by which application is designed to protect itself while in runtime. So it is SAST, right? Right. So let's go to domain 7 then. So we are almost reaching the end of our CISSP, right? So security operations is now whatever you've learned, you have to run the show, right? You have to run the show of security operations. So how to operate security in your organizations. So the first part, once major important part of security operations, is to be ready for any kind of incidents in your organization. So incident response is one of the major part of your business continuity operations, right? Because there would be some events which will have negative impact, and you need to be prepared for that. NIST gives a very, very beautiful document, and I think NIST SP 888, if I'm not wrong, right? What which tells you that for any incident you need to be prepared. You should be have the capability to detect. You should be able to contain what has happened, eradicate what has happened, recover your systems, and then you should be able to have lesson learned, right? Therefore, your computer emergency response team or computer incident response team is one of the major teams which are responsible. Now, you don't have to have a specialized team. You can create a team within your own existing, manpower. Okay, and only thing is to have a process around it. If you define a process, if you practice a process, you know your risks, and your risks from whatever risks you have, you know your vulnerabilities, you know if A, B, C, D can happen, then how do we react? If a ransomware attack happens, from where do we need to recover our systems? Do we have the latest backups? So incident response is not about responding to something live. Incident response is about capability to survive a disaster, right? Capability to survive a incident which can have negative impact. And therefore, today we call it a SOC and what all things, but it has been there for last 20, 30 years, right? The capability to detect. How do you detect an event, and how do you escalate the event into an incident? What are the metrics? How do you triage a event to get to a point where you say that, okay, this event is actually a negative impact? Then you want to contain. You want to contain the situation, that so that it does not blow out of proportion. It should not start infecting your other systems, right? This is where you would like to collect evidence also. You are containing systems, you're containing some kind of malware or some kind of privilege escalation attack. You're trying to observe that it should not escalate further. And then finally, when you know that what is the capability of the attacker, you would like to eradicate the attacker from your infrastructure. It might have removal of malware, registry cleaning processes, restoring from backups, right? So that is where you want to eradicate and bring your systems online again. The second part is understanding digital forensics, right? What happens in security operations? There will be many times when these incidents take place. You might come to know about incident after a very long time. Okay, it happens because attackers are very advanced, and they might lie in infrastructure for a very long time, and it might leave certain trails in your organization. Do you have the logs of the trails? And you have logs of the trails, and it might have a legal or compliance implication. Then there might be a requirement to carry out digital forensics or investigations in your organizations. Now, what happens is, in digital forensics is, you want to retain the information which is there in your memory or in somewhere archived. You would like to have that back so that you can detect if there was some kind of a criminal breach. Okay, then you handle the information very, very sensitively. If you are in a very, very compliance heavy sectors, anti money laundering, PII, you would like to understand how the evidence is handled. Because at times, if evidence is not handled properly, if the custody of the evidence is not proper, the evidence may not be accepted by the court of the law. And therefore, chain of custody, who is handling the custody of the evidence, is also very, very important. And therefore, forensic imaging is very, very critical. So if you will see, if you are in a compliance sector, forensic imaging is very, very critical. If you have to take an image snapshot of a given data or given logs or given memory systems, then you have to use forensic imaging tools. You use write blockers. Whenever you export your logs into your storage, your write blockers are switched on so that nobody is able to overwrite on your logs. Okay, and then you have a process which is called e-discovery. Can someone tell me what is e-discovery, and what would you like to do in e-discovery? A simple thing. What is the process? What is e-discovery? Okay, today majority of your documentation, majority of your logs, everything is digital. And say there is a crime in your organization, or you have to provide evidence in your organization for some legal matter. Okay, there was a CCTV camera and something happened. Someone put a posh case against someone, and there is a CCTV camera, and now that screen recording has to be presented, and somebody has been accused, right? And that CCTV camera, if you have not corrected, if you have not stored that information correctly, if it is not discovered correctly, the accused might go scot free, right? These are the implications, because he can refute that this is a fabricated evidence. And therefore, e-discovery is the legal process of collecting evidence. Remember that. This much is more than enough understanding. There are e-discovery tools these days, e-discovery software, whatnot, but e-discovery is mainly ensuring that the evidence is not tampered with, and you are legally able to receive the evidence which you are going to present against any kind of a, maybe a investigation or a uh, some kind of a violation, right? And then you have to apply security operations controls. So what security major security operations control is? Firstly, least privilege operations. Your systems, your infrastructure should be given only the privileges which users require for doing their task properly in a minimum level, right? Second is change management. Change management is a process of approving, testing, and rolling back changes. That means whenever your system whenever you push a change in your systems and it might impact your confidentiality, integrity, or availability, what you are doing, you're following a change management process so that there is no unwanted outage. Main aim is to prevent any kind of outage. Many times I've seen big companies, I'll not name them, okay? Big companies pushed a change, global systems went out. CrowdStrike, okay? It might be a change management process where a developer pushed a change into the agent, and the agent did a dirty read, and because of the dirty read, you know, the global systems, Microsoft Windows shut down everywhere, right? Aviation was out of business for almost a week. Then you also have configuration management. Configuration management is where you maintain the systems with their required baselines. You use something called configuration management database. If your enterprise systems have a lot of configuration management requirements, what you do is you maintain a baseline of configurations for your systems, and we have tools which are called configuration management databases, so that you know you're not drifting against the baseline configurations for your systems, for your firewalls, for your applications, okay, wherever whatever types of configuration is required. And then in security control, we also do a patch management, because today your hardware systems are running completely on softwares, and most of the softwares and applications are released with patches, and you have to analyze that which are the patches are which are important and your system should be patched. Now at times patching also brings down systems. We have seen a lot of outages because of patch management. Firewall patches released immediately, urgently, we push the patch and network starts behaving you know, erratically. It's happened many times in large enterprises and smaller companies, right? And therefore, since your system's availability is very important, you do something called a backups, right? Generally we have 3 to 1 rule. You have 3 copies, 2 types of media, and 1 offsite. In a good BCDR arrangement, we have generally 3 copies. So today you will see a lot of banks which follow a 3 copy rule. That means there are 3 copies of the information, 2 types of media, okay, and 1 is offsite, okay. So that's the techniques. Now, very important task in security operations is to maintain uh, eyes on your enemy, and that process is called threat intelligence. So threat intelligence is a process by which you keep an eye on your enemy as what is he doing, because in security, whenever you are defensive in nature, you need to keep an eye on your enemy, because you need to know their tactics, techniques, and procedures. So if you want to know their tactics, techniques, and procedures, you need to know what kind of tactics do they do, so that you find out something called indicators of compromised, known IP addresses of, you know, ATPs, known file hashes, known domains from where they launch their attacks. And therefore, in an in for a proactive threat intelligence, you do something called threat hunting. You are already do assuming that you have been breached, and this concept is called assume breach. You're assuming that you've already breached, so you're searching for your threat actors inside your enterprise all the time. Now, for that, you have many frameworks. One of the most common framework is MITRE ATT&CK framework. It's an open source framework available on NIST's database, and you can see that what are the evolving attacks and what are the sequence of actions of advanced threat actors who carry out such kind of attacks. Right. In security operations, you also do user behavior assessments or analytics using UEBA tools. You want to see that is there any insider risk? How are insiders behaving in your enterprise systems? Are there any deviations against the norms? Okay, employee logging in at 3 a.m. to access a particular system. So UEBA systems detect the behavior of a given users. So what happens is generally all these tasks are done by your security operations center. So you generally have a 2 tier or a 3 tier security operations center. So what are the tiers? First tier is where you have the capability to detect a event and escalate it into an incident. Tier 2 is where you have the capability to investigate. Maybe you have forensics team. And tier 3 SOCs are basically those who have the capability, advanced capability to hunt for threats inside your enterprise. So these are the security operations center teams. Right. So this is generally what is covered in SOC. In SOC, what also in security operations, what is also majorly covered is disaster recovery. Right. So one or questions on DR also comes in, right? So this is broadly what is covered in domain 7. And let's have a few questions and then we will go ahead. Okay. It says evidence should be collected to preserve the most volatile data. Where is the data most volatile? Data is the most volatile in CPU registers and RAM, right? Is it most volatile in hard drive? No. In RAM, yes, but hard drive is gone. In network traffic, traffic is moving and coming into. So generally, volatility is something not, not discussed in network. Network traffic is always moving. So ultimately, CPU and RAM is where data will be the most volatile. Isolation of a compromised server from the network. Which phase of the NIST incident or lifecycle does this? Right. So first you want to detect, then you want to contain, right? You would like to contain so that it does not blow out of proportion. Right. And finally, we come to domain 8, which is the software development security. So software development security is all about ensuring that your software is developed securely, and so that somebody can trust your software. That's two main important. Trust is very important part in software, right? So therefore, what do we need to understand? How is the software built? The software is built based on a process which is called a SDLC process, secure software development lifecycle, SDLC, right? Wherein you do a requirement analysis, where you do, okay, what is the requirement of the software, how to design it, how to code it, test, deploy, and maintain the security of the software at each cycle, right? One of the most common you know threat assessment techniques for on softwares is by software threat modeling processes, which are called stride and pasta, right? Stride and pasta are two techniques by which we do threat assessment on applications, and dread is one techniques by which we rank the threat. The aim is to identify and rank threat to your uh, softwares. So stride is spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. Is one of the most well-known framework given by Microsoft to assess threats on your software. Now, today we talk a lot about DevSecOps. So, DevSecOps is basically integrating security processes between development of your software to the hosting of the software into the infrastructure. So, earlier used to develop, security was limited to develop, and then operations team would take over. Today we talk about, because software is today built with agile processes, so you write a code, it gets pushed to your repository. From repository, somebody tests it and puts it into your infrastructure. So a lot of automation has happened here. You would like to put your security tools in between so that your process has a security layer between development and hosting processes. That's called DevSecOps. Right. So one of the most common vulnerabilities which you will find in broadly web applications is given on uh, a database which is called OWASP Top 10. OWASP Top 10 is a open source database of 10 most vulnerabilities in web application, and those are injection attacks, broken authentication, IDOR, cross-site scripting, security misconfiguration. So if you would like to tell your developers that, okay, do you want to develop your software in a safeguarded manner, in a secure manner, what can you advise them to go and look into OWASP Top 10? What are the most common vulnerabilities once you develop web facing applications, right? Given on OWASP Top 10, though OWASP maintains OWASP Top 100, Top 200 also. So therefore, developers should know core secure coding practices. And what are the core secure practices? Developers should always ensure that an application validates what kind of inputs are being given to it, because otherwise the applications will process bad inputs, right? SQL injection is an input validation uh, vulnerability. Your application, whenever it fails, it should know what it needs to do when it fails, and that capacity is called error handling. Because an application, when it fails, might go into a vulnerable state, might not know what to do, it might open itself up for any kind of an attack, right? Cryptography in code, what happens? You use cryptographic libraries inside the code. Generally that is a very very bad process. You never use cryptographic libraries inside the code. They are generally used as a function or a library which is called. Okay, it is never stored. Cryptographic controls are never stored inside the code. That's a bad process. Memory management. If developers don't know about memory management, they might do something called dirty reads or dirty writes. They might write into other processes, operating system. It might touch operating system files, and that will lead into system crash. So that's a very very common. And today most of the application are built using APIs, and therefore APIs are kind of a small gateway ahead of your application, which makes applications, different kind of applications, speaks to each other easily. Therefore you need to secure your APIs. So API key is not security. You have to test APIs as you test a web application or any code. So therefore, there is a software testing and change control process behind software testing. First is code review, where everybody reviews the code. Whosoever team is there, they review the code of each other, right? And then once the code is built, you do something called UAT testing, right? Whereas user accepting testing is done, where different pieces of code are combined together, tested, into integrated, and then brought it up as a system where it is now presented to the user to do a user assessment testing. One of the most common ways in which you test generally applications against random inputs is called fuzzing. You basically put a lot of type of random information inputs to your application to see how it behaves, basically to see how it handles exceptions, right? And today, one of the most common controls to protect your application if it has inherent vulnerabilities, most of us are afraid that developers might have put inherent vulnerabilities. So we put a web application behind something called a web application firewall, which has the capability to detect web based attacks, right? And finally, databases are the most critical part of any application. They store information, and therefore databases should be protected with stored procedures. That means who can access the database application, if they need to access the database, how, what are the procedures, least least privileged database accounts, who can directly access the database. So there should be very very minimum level, minimum number of users with very very least privilege who can access the database directly. And all the sensitive columns where sensitive information like PII is stored should be encrypted, right? So this is broadly domain 6, 7, and 8. This is the easier part of CISSP. 5, 6, 7, 8 are the easier part. 1 and 2 are the easier part. 3 and 4 are the most longest domains in CISSP. Let's have few questions, and then we will have an end to our 3 hours marathon session over extend over last 3 days. Oops, I have already shown the answer, right? So generally, whenever you if a web application is there and you don't have input validation, mainly attackers can insert a SQL query, and that attack is called SQL injection. And I've not deleted the answers. That's not right. Okay. I forgot to delete the answers. Just a second. Those who can see, that's okay. Right. So cross SQL injection is when you have uh, uh, not done a proper input validation. It will lead to SQL injection attacks, right? Then stride is one of the most common uh, technique to evaluate threat to your applications. Okay, one last question, and then last question, or will you have more questions? Okay, yeah. You want to send malformed data. What is the malformed data? Malformed data is it regression testing? No. Is it static analysis? No. Is it penetration testing? No. It is fuzzing. You basically fuzzing the giving malformed information, right? Right. So with this, I come to end of our 3-day, 3-hour marathon session for CISSP preparation. I'll give you certain exam tips. Always think from risk perspective. Okay, as I said, always think from risk perspective. What is the risk to the system? As an information security officer, you will not be able to put controls. You don't have any limit. You have limited budgets. Organizations have as low as 1% of IT budgets, or maximum maybe 3 to 5% of IT budgets in critical spaces. So your budgets are very limited. So you have to think rationally. So it should be based on risk. You cannot protect everything with the same level, right? Always stick to governance. Due diligence is one of the major part. Are you thinking as a parent, or are you thinking as a kid? Are you thinking as a technician, or are you thinking as someone bigger who has experience? So that's what thinking like a manager is. You are not a technician. Technician part is more hands on. We have all lived that life, right? So security should always be with least disruption, because if you cause I've seen many times security professionals go overboard, and there have been a lot of you know interruptions in businesses, right? I will give you my practical tips is you will require, if you are preparing for CISSP, what you do require is a strategy which I always discuss. You require three revisions: first revision, second revision, third revisions. This generally extends over 45 days, this generally extends over 30 days, and this generally extends over 15 to 20 days. You book your exam here within 60 days. Okay. Within 50 to 60 days, you should book the exam. After first preparation, you're generally clear, okay, I can do it. So let's book the exam now. So generally, when my students, my mentees, they come and they do CISSP training, those who are very sure they want to give the exam, they book it here. They say, I booked the exam. We'll see what happens. Right. And then they book it. Okay. So we have had great success stories in the beginning of 2025. People were passing two people, three people every day because most of them were looking at their appraisals maybe and they wanted to pass. Okay. So a lot of them passed, and we have more than 100 plus people who have passed CISSP with Protect Academy. And recently, a lot of students have said that we are the number one institutions as far as CISSP is concerned. We do very, very limited courses, and that's why probably the concentrated effort is what shows results, right? So if you are interested, we do have a full-time training batch which runs over weekends. It's coming up in March. Those of you who would like to have training and then give the exam are free to attend. Else, this exam can be done on self basis also, preparation also, but that would require a hell lot of motivation. So CISSP, do not, when you're preparing for CISSP, don't extend it beyond 90 to 100 days. It becomes a pain. It's such a big exam. So just stick to it, and that's all. Best of luck. Stick to official guides. Don't go here or there. Stick to Cybex 4th edition practice test. Stick to Cybex 10th edition. Okay, and do three revisions. Okay, and also remember that there are a lot of content, a lot of training available. Just stick to the official guide. Okay, I'm done with this 3-hour marathon session. It's extended over last 3 days. I hope you all have enjoyed. Would love to have a feedback from all of you. That did it help you? Did it help you in understanding the broadly what CISSP is all about? I'm done. Thank you so much. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Rahul. Thank you everyone for joining me over the last 3 days, and I hope best of luck, and I hope you all pass this beautiful exam. It's a great achievement to have a CISSP. Uh, no matter what whosoever says what, I'm telling you, the achievement you get by preparing and passing this exam, it's such a knowledge booster. It's such a mindset changer, and it definitely helps your security career. Right. Thank you so much, and see you next time. I'll probably get on next with maybe AIMS or maybe AI governance or maybe get some technical training. Thank you so much and see you next time till we meet again. Take care. Bye bye.